The NIkkor Z 100-400 f4.5 5.6 VRS is a full-frame, wide-range telephoto zoom released in October of 2021 for a suggested retail price of $2699.95. We get 9 rounded diaphragm blades with a variable aperture range of f4.5 to 5.6 wide open and f32 to f40 stopped all the way down. It's constructed of 1 billion elements in 42 million groups. That's a joke. Kind of. 25 elements in 20 groups, including 6 ED and 2 Super ED elements, and includes Nikon's Nano crystal and ARNEO coatings with fluorine coating on the front lens element. Nice. It's internally focusing but externally zooming with a minimum focus distance of 0.75, that's 2.46 feet, at the wide end and 0.98 meters, that's 3.22 feet, at the telephoto end. This lens is 98 millimeters, or 3.9 inches in diameter, and 222 millimeters, or 8.8 inches in length. It has built-in VR and weighs in at 1,355 grams, and that's 2.987264 pounds. 3 pounds. But how does it feel? Pretty heavy. It's one of the heavier lenses that I've used in the Z lineup. External zoom, which I'm not a fan of, but it doesn't actually stick out that far. The buttons and the switches are all the typical Nikon fare. It feels like every other Nikon lens. We have a ton of rings. We have the zoom ring, we have the focus ring, we have what used to be an aperture ring, but is now whatever you want it to be. I turn it off as the aperture because I always hit it. Spoiler, this is also going to be hit all the time, so I would suggest whenever you're working with like a Nikon zoom lens, you just turn off manual focus override because it will drive you crazy. The tripod foot, I'm not going to take it off. I never do. I usually just do this thing, and I just kind of turn it out of the way. I generally like pop it up here, like that. Overall, though, I think it's a fine feeling lens. Looks good. Nice big front element there. Nice and clean, provided by the rental company, which I won't say the name of because they refused to work with the channel. So I won't be giving them any shout-outs. But they did give me a lens hood this time. Nice clicking mechanism. I like that. I wish all the lenses did that. And I'd say that's pretty handsome looking with that lens hood on. The lens hood quality, however, is the typical Nikon fare. It's plastic. You'll probably break one of the lips off if you actually drop it, but it'll protect your front lens element from, you know, the knocks on the table and bumps and things like that. There's not much to say about the feel of it. It's heavy, but it feels robust. I don't mind a heavy lens, especially with something with the workhorse ability of this thing. 1-400 is a nice range for some of your sporty and wildlife-y stuff. Probably not going to do a whole lot of small birds with it, but, you know. The Z9 is recording me right now, so let's just see how it feels on the Nikon Z8. There's absolutely no balance at all. It's all front heavy. This is a long lens that happens to be heavy, so no surprises there. I imagine that going out for a while, this would probably get pretty tiring on the Nikon Z8. I wouldn't even bother putting it on my Z5 because I know that's just going to feel absolutely foolish. Not that it can't be done, it totally can. At least since it doesn't stick out that far when it's zoomed in at 400, it doesn't feel significantly different as far as how front heavy it is. Now let's get out into the field and do the test shot segment. Alright, so I'm out here with the NIkkor Z 100-400 4556 VRS. It is VR, even though it doesn't say VR, it just says S, but it is VR. And you can tell because whenever you're shooting it, the VR is like real snappy every time you take a shot, kind of like the 70-200, which takes a little bit of getting used to. We need to do focus speed first. Something weird that I haven't seen in any other Z lens is there's a huge discrepancy in how it performs with video and how it performs when shooting photos. So whenever you're in video, it's got like a little bit of a delay, like you push and then it like kind of goes and it's not really that fast. But in photo, it's not as fast as you might expect it. It's quick, but it's not like as fast as like the 70 to 200. The 70 to 200 is very, very quick, but it's just not as fast as I kind of was expecting it to be. Just throwing that out there. All right, focus noise. I can't hear anything like at all. All right, we're gonna come over here and do a little focus distance test. God, that's bright. We're focusing on that thing. So let's try this at 100 first. About right there is the minimum. Now with 400, it's about right there. So basically, as we saw, at 100, the focus distance is closer, body to subject, but when you're back, being zoomed in at 400, while you're further away from your subject, the perspective is that you're closer to the subject whenever you're zoomed all the way in. We're gonna go ahead and do our black and white ability test while we're here. All right, now we have to do saturation. Gotta come over here and do our red. Doing this lantern again. It's kind of in shadow, so I'm gonna come over here. Yeah, that looks more red. Through the viewfinder, the red looks really good. Let's fire one across the yard and see the green. The green looks all right. Is it possible to get any blue today? It's so bright outside. The blue looks like the kind of blue I like. This is weird, but this thing doesn't want to focus on infinity on its own, which is kind of stupid. Let's see a little yellow right there. It's not ideal, but... And unlike the other test videos that I've done so far, kind of withholding my sharpness testing to something just more interesting than, you know, shooting the bark. I find that helpful and useful, but at the same time, it's like, it's super boring. All right, now I think we need to get inside and see what the results of these tests are. Looking at the green saturation looks very natural, so that's good. I probably wouldn't really want to correct this particular green. You guys might know that I'm a little finicky with my colors. As far as the blues go, there seems a little bit dull. Now, often Nikon's blues can kind of like look super, super blue, and I don't like that. I call it JPEG-y blue, but this blue in this particular picture is just a tad dull. Boost that a little bit. Looking at the reds, I really like the red saturation on this particular lens. Looks good. Got a little yellow divot tool here. Yellows look nice and rich. We'll see more about color in later images. All right, let's check our black and white ability. We can see here that we have nice sharpness on this lens. Don't think it's as sharp as the 70 to 200. Definitely good detail, good contrast, really good contrast on this lens. Sharpness is one thing, but contrast and micro contrast is another. Both of those can give you the illusion that the lens is actually sharper than it is, because those two things can bring out extra details, like these little fine details in here, all these different shades, all these little extra fine details in here. We're at 200%, so it doesn't look exceedingly sharp at 200%, of course, but you can see all of these little tiny wood grains because of the strong contrast that this lens has. I imagine this is going to look great in black and white, and let's go ahead and click it. It does. It looks very, very good in black and white. And if I click Gravedigger, which is like my preset, looks really, really good. Excellent black and white ability. All right, let's take a look at some images from my little walk here. Some of these I kind of adjusted a little bit just as I was weeding out. I had 880 images, so... But we could see the benefit that we're getting from the excellent contrast on this lens, and we're getting a ton of like little details. This particular image isn't that sharp at 200%. That's not fair. Let's look at 100%. It doesn't look as sharp as like the 70 to 200, but I think this has more contrast than the 70 to 200. Therefore, we're getting like more kind of smaller detail. It's just not razor sharp, smaller detail. But I'll take something like this over razor sharpness any day of the week. A little black bird here. It's not super sharp. This isn't a very good image. Little blue jay doing his thing here. Let's get in here and look. Good color. Can you see the beautiful color of the brown. I'm kidding. But no, nice rich blue in the disc golf thing. Greens look good. The blue of the Blue Jay looks good. And this is, I don't know, a pigeon. I don't know what this is. But the Z9 and the 100 to 400 looked like it got its eye really good. This is at 400, and so like I'm not as close to this kind of small bird as I'd like to be, but did a good job of finding the eye. At 200, obviously, it looks a little noisy. It's a little bit soft at this full 100, at least in this image, but I can tell that it was able to get the eye. Now, I had a huge sequence of whatever kind of pigeon this is, and something was really consistent. While this lens has, in my opinion, better contrast than the 70 to 200, it does not perform at the same level as far as the tracking goes. It does not keep up like the 70 to 200. I found that to be really, really consistent. We'll get into some more images later where that was also the case. But we got this pigeon right here who's getting some fish. And then at some point he flew off, and I tracked him for a little bit, but it's just not dead on. Every once in a while it would grab and it would be like dead on. Not nearly as consistent as the 70 to 200. The 70 to 200 has almost a perfect hit rate. In my backyard with Lolly, may she rest in peace, the best model I ever had. And see, yeah, it totally lost right here. 1600th of a second. Should have been fast enough, because this pigeon, he wasn't moving very much. He was kind of doing like this hovering maneuver. Oh, I don't know, 50 frames. He wasn't hardly going anywhere. And it appeared to be on his eye, but it just didn't quite keep up. And that one's just missed completely, actually. But it found it again, kind of, as he was coming in. But he wasn't moving that fast. I thought for sure that 1600th of a second would be good, because I've observed these guys and I've watched these guys for a while, and they're just kind of like clunky and slow. And so I thought that'd be fast enough. Maybe not. I'm not a wildlife guy. Either way, the actual tones of this lens are incredibly rich. And that's the positive we can take away from this particular series of shots. This one here is just a good shape of the pigeon coming into land. His tail's all wet. Let's give this just a little bit of a play. Actually, I wonder what this will look like with some of my presets. That's moody brown. I actually kind of really like that. And as I was driving home, they had these cows that were grazing right by the fence. I freaking love cows. Again, not exceedingly sharp, but just insane amounts of detail. There's like a ton of contrast on this lens. And I don't think for a second that this lens is not sharp. It's definitely sharp. It's just not, like I wouldn't give this a 3 on my grading score. Like I would give this a 2. It's sharp. The 70 to 200, I would give a 3 on sharpness. But again, the detail on this lens is its selling point. It oozes with so much contrast that you literally get like everything. Every little change in shadow and highlight and everything in between is just there. Actually, what will this look like with like orange moody? It looks dramatic. Dramatic cow. Vampire looks totally unnatural, but kind of cool. Bonjour Blast is ridiculous. These ain't bad, though. Ooh, matte punch looks like film. This was another example. I had like hundreds and hundreds of these. It had a fairly low hit rate. Now, part of that, yes, is going to be because both of these subjects are kind of dark. And so the eye tracking wasn't working, and so I just switched to like 3D when they were running at me. I tried several different focusing modes, and it's clear that this lens just doesn't track as fast as the 70 to 200. Now, very few lenses do. The 70 to 200 is an absolute monster. But even though they're not tack sharp, you can see the crazy amounts of detail that you get because of the insane contrast. I think this lens has better images than the 70 to 200. It's just not as much of a workhorse as the 70 to 200. That one kind of missed. See what we got going on. Again, I keep talking about it, but the actual detail is really, really excellent. Just not stupidly sharp. Yep, we got right on her nose. 200 is unfair, but that looks good. That's a good position in the upward running, nice and sharp on the nose. Nice and sharp all through here in the shadowy, darker areas. Just tons of detail. You can still see like every individual hair. Can't believe the amount of contrast on this lens. It's really, really crazy good. Good saturation here. This is like underexposed, just like with every other lens. If you underexpose it by like a stop or so, everything just gets better in my opinion. It's nice and sharp. Good detail in the tongue. Each little kind of crack and everything looks good. That looks good. It's just not screamingly sharp. But maybe that's not what you're after. You're not after screaming sharpness. If you just want like optical character, like this lens has some of the best contrast I think I've ever seen, giving like all this little intertonal detail. Like, look at this. This is little tiny little things. These might, on many lenses, just kind of disappear. But even in the out of focus area, there's just so much detail to be had. I got this little tiny little bug flying off. This looks good right here. It's at 5.6, 800th of a second while she's trotting. And on this last one, we got Scruffy going in for a bite. Looks good. A little bit of motion blur. I'd been shooting Stella mostly, and she's much slower. Scruffy is lightning fast. This dog here, you might want to shoot like over 2,000 of a second. He's very, very quick. Before I give my final conclusion, if you're considering picking up this lens for yourself, consider using the link in the description. I get a very small commission to help this channel out. Overall, I find this lens to be very good. However, not as good as I thought it would be. I almost have to say that this lens is a little bit overpriced, only because the autofocus is not as fast as I thought it would be. I would expect at this price point for it to be at least as fast as the 70-200, and at least in this copy, that doesn't seem to be the case. However, for somebody who's not willing to throw the extra money at something like the 400-4.5 Prime, but they're also interested in like the kind of sports and action kind of territory, or wildlife as far as like walking around kind of wildlife, like they enjoy going to the zoo, right? Where a zoom is going to be a lot more helpful than a prime. This is definitely the only game in town as far as the optical quality goes for that kind of person. Image quality, I think it's right where it needs to be. I just wish it was a little bit faster on that focusing. And also that weird thing that it does when in video, I've never seen that on any other lens. So this is not a bad lens. I don't want you to think that my conclusion is this lens is bad or I don't like it. I think this lens is awesome, and I would still very much consider owning this. It's gonna come down to whenever I test the 400mm f4.5 in a future video. Make sure you subscribe if you don't wanna miss that. And if you wanna see it as soon as I'm done editing it, way before everybody else, you can consider becoming a member of the channel. And by the way, if you want access to the Image Circle Discord where you can talk to me all the time, the Tier 1 membership of the YouTube channel will give you access to that. Also coming up soon with this lens, I will be taking the Nikon Z9 and the NIkkor Z 100-400 f4.5 5.6 VRS to the Sedgwick County Zoo into my favorite exhibit. They have this awesome aviary with all kinds of tropical birds and stuff. We're gonna put this lens to the test in there. But for now, I'm Z-Wade, the Z-Wade, and Z-Wade Photo. Stay sharp, YouTube.